My hate never perishes. It is born anew in a cycle with no end. I will rise again. Those like you, those who share the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, they are eternally bound to this curse. An incarnation of my hatred shall ever follow your kind, dooming them to wander a blood-soaked sea of darkness for all time. A curse founded in hatred, uttered by a god from before Hyrule's history had truly begun. This curse was to define the fate of a man born into hardship and war, a man whose very nature destined him to rule his people from the moment he entered the world, a man who would ultimately be consumed by the echoes of that ancient hatred until nothing of the man himself remained. This is the story of Ganondorf Drogmire, the unwitting heir to the imprisoned god Demise, the man who would leave his humanity behind and become the Demon King, Ganon. My name is John Reardon. Welcome to episode 4 of Legends of Hyrule, where we'll explore the lore and theories behind the world of The Legend of Zelda. With Tears of the Kingdom mere days away, we stand upon the brink of the return of one of Zelda's most legendary villains. But how did Ganondorf come to be? What drove him to such hatred that he was consumed by the dark beast within? To understand the life of Ganondorf, one must first understand the culture into which he was born. The Gerudo are a race of desert dwellers consisting almost entirely of women. While they would eventually come to ally themselves with the royal family of Hyrule, for much of the Gerudo's history, their culture evolved independently. As a result, the Gerudo have their own distinct religion. Rather than worshipping Hylia in addition to the major gods Din, Feror, and Nehru, Gerudo have their own set of deities called the Seven Heroines. These figures represent 7 distinct concepts: skill, spirit, endurance, knowledge, flight, motion, and gentleness. At one point, possibly during Ganondorf's time, the Gerudo worshipped an 8th heroine, but she has since been wiped from their history and is only worshipped by devout members of select Gerudo denominations. All of this serves to highlight the strong and unique matriarchal society that is the Gerudo. So rare was the birth of a boy, said to happen only once every 100 years or so, that many believed that any male Gerudo was destined by their gods to rule. Such was the case for Ganondorf Drogmire, who was born into a particularly difficult time for the Gerudo people. During Ganondorf's youth, the entirety of Hyrule was in a state of civil war, which lasted for many years and claimed many lives. The Gerudo, as we see them during Ocarina of Time, a period directly following the conclusion of the war, have been reduced to a group of thieves, scavenging to survive. Across the desert, we can see clear indications of the grandeur of their once great civilization, and statues honoring their deities. My country lay within a vast desert. When the sun rose into the sky, a burning wind punished my lands, searing the world. And when the moon climbed into the dark of night, a frigid gale pierced our homes. No matter when it came, the wind carried the same thing: death. We do not know what became of Ganondorf's biological mother or who his father may have been, but as a child he was raised by a pair of Gerudo witches, Kome and Kotake. Here is perhaps where we see the corruption of the young Ganondorf begin. With his home ravaged by war, his mother nowhere to be seen, and under the influence of 2 powerful witches, the hatred imbued in Ganondorf by Demise's curse so long ago begins to take shape. As he sees his people suffer, their homes battered by a harsh and unforgiving environment, and their once powerful civilization left in ruins, Ganondorf turns his attention to the prosperous lands of Hyrule's king. The winds that blew across the green fields of Hyrule brought something other than suffering and ruin. I coveted that wind. Following the conclusion of the Civil War, and as part of the reunification of Hyrule, Ganondorf traveled to Hyrule Castle and pledged fealty to the king. This is also where he was first spotted by the then very young Link and Zelda of this era. Meanwhile, as Ganondorf prepared to take Hyrule for himself, Kome and Kotake began using their magic to brainwash the rest of the Gerudo into going along with his plan. That is, with the exception of Ganondorf's second-in-command, Naboru, who was already becoming aware of Ganondorf's plot to seize Hyrule's throne. She works with a then very young Link and tries to stop him, before ultimately being captured and controlled by the witches. With his people ready to go along with his plan, Ganondorf kills the royal family save for the Princess Zelda, who is hurried away by her guardian Impa. For the next 7 years, Ganondorf rules over all of Hyrule, subjugating or otherwise plotting to eliminate any race that could hope to stand against him. With this, the curse of demise had fully taken root in his heart. It's important to remember that while Ganondorf's conquest of Hyrule may have started in a misguided attempt to make a better life for his people, when his goals were ultimately finally complete, he left them all behind. Any love he had for his people faded away, replaced by this primordial hatred. When Link himself travels to the Gerudo Desert, frees Naboru from her imprisonment, and defeats the witches, a nearby carpenter once held prisoner by the Gerudo comments that they've grown less aggressive since the witches were killed. Under Naboru's leadership, the Gerudo begin to return to their old ways as a powerful but honorable culture of their own. When Ganondorf is confronted by Link and Zelda, the true nature of Demise's curse is finally realized, as he transforms into a boar-like beast, Ganon. With the power of the 7 sages, including Zelda and Naboru, Link manages to seal Ganon away within the Sacred Realm. We see that Ganon reverts back to the form of Ganondorf. Almost as if we're hearing the echo of the ancient curse, Ganondorf cries out to Link and Zelda from the edge of the Sacred Realm. "Someday when this seal is broken, that is when I will exterminate your descendants, as long as the Triforce of Power is in my hand." The events I've just described lay out the fall of Ganondorf in what the Zelda timeline refers to as the adult timeline. After the events of Ocarina of Time, Zelda sends Link back through time to his own childhood. Here, Ganondorf was able to be stopped and sealed before he ever came to power. In this timeline, known as the Child Timeline, the King of Hyrule, having never been slain, banishes the Gerudo from the desert. Later in this timeline, when Ganondorf escapes from the Sacred Realm in Twilight Princess, we see the desert is devoid of civilization, save for the abandoned ruins of the Gerudo. The next time we do encounter the Gerudo in this timeline, they are living instead in a place called the Desert of Doubt, where a new Ganondorf has been born, who will ultimately be defeated and sealed within the Four Sword. Back in the adult timeline, when Ganondorf does return, he rises to power unopposed. In a final effort to stop him, the gods themselves sink all of Hyrule beneath a vast ocean. Even this, however, is not enough, and a new incarnation of Link and Zelda must use the Master Sword to seal him once and for all beneath the ocean. In the final timeline, called the Fallen Hero Timeline, Link fails to stop Ganondorf during the events of Ocarina of Time. As a result, the 7 sages must help each other escape capture and raise an army against Ganondorf, in what would come to be known as the Imprisoning War. During the war, Ganondorf transforms into Ganon, but is ultimately sealed by the sages. Within this timeline, only Ganon has ever reappeared while his human form has remained sealed. Based on a comment made by Zelda series producer E.G. Aonuma in a recent interview, it appears that both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom take place at the end of this Fallen Hero timeline, meaning that Ganondorf will be making his first on-screen appearance in this timeline. Prior to this, he was only mentioned in the Manual for The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, which loosely recounts the events that would eventually become Ocarina of Time and the Imprisoning War. Ganondorf's body has presumably been sealed ever since the events described in A Link to the Past in this timeline. Ganondorf Drogmire, the man whose name the modern Gerudo now curse, instead venerating the name Naboru, is back. He is perhaps the most interesting villain across the entire series. He himself is not an imprisoned god or an unleashed dark beast. He's a man, born into a difficult, war-torn life, who is corrupted by those trusted to raise him. He has the capacity to care for his people, but ultimately loses sight of them as hatred consumes him. Now and then, as we see in The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, we catch a glimpse of the man beneath the monster, before it is inevitably swallowed once more by the darkness of demise. Thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to Nintendo World Report TV and checking out NintendoWorldReport.com for a whole lot more. If you'd like to chat with us about this, or anything else Nintendo related, you can join our Discord using the link in the description. If you'd like to get a hold of me specifically, feel free to reach out on Twitter using the handle on screen. Once again, my name's John Raridan, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.
This video was made possible by our generous supporters on Patreon. Did you know that Nintendo World Report is funded directly by fans like you? When you support Nintendo World Report on Patreon, you get immediate access to multiple exclusive podcasts every month, exclusive Discord channels, an early look at select content, and more, all for as little as $1 a month. Check out patreon.com/NWR for all the details.